All right, my name is Dennis Gill with the Americans in Wartime Experience. Today's date is 17 November 2023. I am in Stafford, Virginia, and I've got the pleasure of speaking with Dorothy Beatty via the internet. Thank you, Dorothy, very much for sitting down and talking to us.
You bet. Thanks for
Yep.
asking.
Yep. If you could just tell us where you are right now.
I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay. Outstanding. Outstanding. And then just tell us a little bit about who you are. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Go to school? That kind of thing.
Okay. Well, my dad was a Marine in World War II, and he was in Guadalcanal, Mundo, and Bougainville. So he saw a lot of action. And when he came back to the States, he was in Bakersfield for about a year, I guess, and that's where I was born. And then I ended up moving over time. I went to Texas first and then to New Mexico, which is what I claim. So I feel like I grew up here. And I went to high school in Clayton, New Mexico, which is this wonderful little rural town, which was a wonderful place to grow up. And then I went to nurses training in Rochester, Minnesota. And then from there, I went to Albuquerque and joined the Air Force. And I was stationed in California, Vietnam, and North Carolina. Got out and went to Colorado, decided to get out of nursing. And so took about 2 years, I guess, to get all the prerequisites for dental school. And I went to Seattle for dental school. And then I came back to the state I love, New Mexico. And I've been in Santa Fe ever since then.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. So you said your father was military?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any other family members that served?
No, actually, he was the only one.
Okay.
My
And did
brother,
he?
my brother was younger than me, and he played football. And when I was in Vietnam, he had a low draft number, and I said that I would extend forever to keep him from having to go over there. He would have argued with that because he would have figured it was his duty. But luckily, he had hurt his shoulder really bad playing football, and so he didn't pass the physical.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't have to extend. It was a good deal.
Yeah, that is a good deal. Um, so why did you decide to join the military, and why did you choose the Air Force?
Um, there were some people I knew that had died in Vietnam, and I, in my youth and ignorance, thought if I went over there, maybe I could understand what was going on. Of course, that didn't work at all, but I also felt a duty to my country because my dad kind of taught us to grow up to be quite patriotic. And I joined the Air Force because there were 4 recruiters that the Army, Navy, and Air Force kind of, I think, got points for signing up nurses. And when the Army recruiter came to see me, he tried to also sell me insurance on the side because he was gonna retire. And the Air Force promised me I could go to Vietnam and that I would be in wonderful places. He didn't say they were in little tiny towns and in a war zone. I mean, I wanted to go to the war zone.
Yeah.
And, so I picked the Air Force.
Okay. Um, and you eventually went to Vietnam.
Mhm.
You were a nurse when you were in the Air Force?
Yes, I was.
Were you a nurse prior to joining?
I was. I'd been out of nurses training only about maybe 6 or 9 months.
Okay,
And then I was stateside for a year because the Air Force said you had to be in a hospital stateside for a year before they sent you to Nam.
I
And
see.
then I went to Nam.
Right. And what years were you in Vietnam?
69, 70.
69 and 70? Okay.
Mhm.
Um, how did you get to Vietnam? Airplane, I'm assuming? You flew
Yes,
over?
it was an airplane. I flew over.
Okay. Give me your first impressions when you get there. What's the first thing when you step onto Vietnam? Um,
Well, um, we had to circle because they couldn't land because we had incoming going on at the time. When we finally landed and I opened the door, it was like there were still flares going on all over the place, and the smells were intense and the heat was strong. And I just, in the doorway, thought, wow, in war, there are no rules. And that was my first thought. And then I walked into the depot place. There was another woman traveling with me who was a colonel, it was really nice. And and I just saw soldiers lying all around holding their M16s, and there were Vietnamese sleeping on the ground there too, waiting for hops to go somewhere, and it was chaos, and it was just like, wow, I've never been in anything like this before, and you just keep going.
Right.
Found a Jeep to take us back to the quarters and found a place to sign in, and you just keep dealing with things that come your way.
Right. So you got into it right away. As soon as you got off the airplane, it hit you in the face, literally.
It was, yeah, it was right there. Yeah.
Okay. And you're a nurse at the time. So what are your duties in Vietnam? What does that mean? You're a nurse in Vietnam.
Well, I was assigned initially to a 68 bed ward, and we had a variety of patients. They had already had surgery, and they didn't require air evac out, so we took care of those, although some of them would not do well, and we'd have to stabilize them so they could be air evac'd out. We had, Koreans there, because they didn't have a hospital of their own. We had, POWs, they were Viet Cong and North Vietnamese, and mostly just 18 and 19-year-old GIs with the most the saddest eyes I've ever seen in my life.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I had 2 corpsmen. There was myself and 2 corpsmen on. So, we handled a lot. We'd have tons of IVs running and meds to give and dressings to change and patients to joke with.
Right. So you're not at a forward location. You're back at a hospital, I assume, or makeshift hospital.
In
They'd
Vietnam,
already received initial care by the time you see them.
by the time I did, but not necessarily by the time they got to the hospital.
Okay.
In Vietnam, because of the helicopters, the choppers, they could pick them up from the battle and just take them to the closest hospital or the one that might meet their needs the most.
Right.
So, yeah, we had incoming, before I got there, there was an extension. The Army had, a small base called 6cc, which was a convalescent center. So if they were injured and could return to duty within 30 days, they would go there to recoup and get strong enough to go back in the field. And sappers came across the base, got in, threw satchel charges into the 6cc buildings. So they had quite a few injuries from that. And they threw one into the nurses' quarters there, but luckily it didn't go off. So, no, we weren't in an actual battle itself, but we were a place that they like to hit with mortars.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you were close enough to be in jeopardy, I guess. I mean, to rocket attacks or mortar attacks or
Yeah, they happen
whatever.
frequently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
then
what did
after several months, I transferred to the intensive care unit. And there I had 12 ICU beds, and I had some post-op, like if someone had had surgery, and I would recover them. Or actually, my corpsman and the corpsmen were the most amazing people I've met in my whole life. Couldn't have survived without them. They were unbelievable. And so there would be 2 corpsmen and myself on that ward.
right. And so you're an Air Force nurse. I assume there's Army nurses and Navy and all that together, correct? You're all working together.
Not at Cameron. Cameron was all
No,
Air Force.
all Air
The
Force.
Army
Okay.
had their own bases, and the Navy had a base in Da Nang, and then they had the ships offshore.
Okay. Okay.
So we were all separate
Gotcha.
in our locations.
Right. All right. What were living conditions like? Where did you live?
Actually, I came a little bit after the nurses had started going there. So I had a hooch and I shared it with a roommate. So it was a small room, had 2 beds, an air conditioner, which was really prime, wonderful, and 2 lockers where we stored our flight jackets and helmets and stuff.
Right.
And then I think there was, if you went up, it was sandbagged everywhere. So if you walked down the walkway, there were 2 sides to it. And in the middle, the 2 sides were connected with the bathrooms. There was a toilet and showers, which most of the time functioned. and then there were 4 quarters of 4 rooms each on each side, and so that's where I was, and in the center was kind of a patio place with some tables where you could go outside and
Okay.
sit and have a Coke or a drink or whatever.
Right. Right. So where you were living, was that ever attacked or anything like that? Or were you kind of left alone there?
No, it was never hit by mortars, and no, sappers didn't get in there.
Okay. Okay. And is this on a base
Mhm, it
where,
was
where you're living?
yeah, it was a 500-bed hospital, and it was a huge base.
Okay.
Actually, Cameron was a peninsula that stuck out into the ocean, obviously, if
Right.
it's a peninsula, but it had a huge safe bay. So, we were on the peninsula because we were Air Force and they had good runways. At the neck of the peninsula was the Navy because that's where they ships would come in. They did a lot of unloading there. And then on the inland side was the Army, and they had the huge
Okay.
ammo dump there. They had a dispersing unit there. So all 3 services were there, but they had kind of different missions. The sappers preferred to go for the ammo dump. So they blew it up, and it was just like amazing fireworks when they would hit the ammo dump, but they would go for anything they could get.
Right. Right. What did you do for recreation? Did you have any downtime?
Yeah, we had some downtime, not
Okay.
a
And
lot.
what did you do?
Well, because we were Air Force, we knew some pilots, and they in their quarters, would usually set aside 1 room or 2 that they would put together and make what they called a party hooch. So, sometimes we would go over there and play music and laugh and talk and drink.
Right. Yeah.
There weren't very many of us, so it was the odds were really nice, but it was more friendships than anything else because
Right.
that's just the way it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get to go anywhere, or did you pretty much stay there the whole time you were in Vietnam?
I caught a hop to Vung Tau once, um, which is right on the ocean, and I caught a hop to Dalat once, which was beautiful. It was an old French resort up in the mountains. They actually had fresh, uh, fruits there, and flowers. They had a marketplace. Cameron was sprayed heavily with Agent Orange because it
Hmm.
was such an important area. So there weren't any birds, there weren't any flowers. It was amazing. I just remember thinking, how come there's no birds in a tropical area? But so we didn't have a lot of nature around us besides sand and the beautiful ocean. So, so that was a really nice one. Then I got to go TDY for 2 days to the Philippines once. I caught a hop over with the air on an airvac plane because the chief nurses, we had talked to them and just said, "We need to get off base once in a while. This is really heavy here, and we just need a break." So we got to hop over for 2 days and come back. And then I got to go on R&R and leave. And I went on to Hong Kong and to Bangkok.
No. Okay. Okay. What was it like there during that period of time? Did you enjoy it? Um,
Oh, yeah. It was a hotel, they had real food, you could
okay.
take a shower, you could take a bath, you could actually get in a bathtub. Oh, yeah, it was nice. It was
Yeah.
very nice.
It's amazing in a war zone. The little things are what make a difference. The things that everyone does every day and takes for granted, like getting a bath or a shower. That's something that you remember still 50 years later.
Oh, yeah, we could excuse me, we could take a shower, but there was so much mold growing on the
Right.
walls, and they put those wooden boards that they load stuff on to
Pallets.
pallets. Yeah, they
Yeah.
had pallets, and they would rot away, and they would just put new pallets in, so you didn't wanna touch anything, you didn't wanna really step on anything. It
Right.
was kinda gross, but it was a shower, and that was wonderful.
Right.
But
Right.
on R&R, oh my gosh, it was luxury.
Right. Did you were you able to keep in touch with family at all while you were there?
Yeah, that was before cells and stuff like cell
Right.
phones and stuff like that. So there was letter writing, and it would take 3 weeks usually, sometimes a little longer for letters to go back and forth. But yeah, my family was great. And my mom sent me care packages, which would usually have corn tortillas in them. I'm trying to think of the brand that made those because they were in a little tin can and you could open them. And salsa and what else did she send me? And she'd send me homemade candy. So we had my roommate and I, Duffy, had ordered an electric skillet from Sears because they
Mhm.
delivered to Vietnam, which is amazing. And so she was really good at bartering. So she would get ground hamburger and onion and tomato, and we would make tacos and put
Wow.
hot sauce on them. It was like heaven.
Right. I'm sure. Um, what are some incidents that stand out about your time there? Doesn't have to be anything bad. Just what do you remember most about your time over there?
Of course, the patients.
Right.
I mean, they're still with me. Um, but the camaraderie that was there was wonderful. Like the Debbie and I were bonded forever until she died from Agent Orange complications about 11 years ago. It's hard to explain the bond that you have with the people who work in such dire conditions,
Right.
but it's unbreakable. And so just going back to the hooch and having her, if she wasn't on duty, um, we'd go out in the little central courtyard and laugh and smoke and the camaraderie was really, really important.
Right. Right. And I think you just mentioned it. You keep in touch with her or kept in touch with her until her passing. So it's you became lifelong friends.
Oh yeah. She moved to Santa Fe maybe 8 years before she died, I guess. She was living
Okay.
on the East Coast, and she came out to visit me and said, "I think this is where I wanna be," and I think she came out here to die
Right.
because she had had breast cancer and then she got ovarian cancer. So it was really wonderful having her
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Um, Vietnam was not a popular war, especially towards the end of the 60s into the 70s. Were you aware of what was going on in the United States as far as protests and the anti-war movement? Uh,
Yeah, we were when Kent State happened, they had a TV in the ward, um, where I had the 68 patients,
mhm.
and we heard about Kent State going on. Um, I didn't know it was as awful as it was, but when when I was ready, deroast means to leave the country, come back, and a friend of mine who'd left earlier said, "Dottie, as soon as you get off of the plane, go into the bathroom and change into civilian clothes because it's really awful over here." And so I did. So I hid being a nurse for years and years and years.
Really? And
And
what? Where, go ahead.
she had not changed into her clothes, and she did get yelled at, and yeah.
Right. Right. Um, so where did you come back? Where so you came back from San Francisco? I'm assuming it
No, I
seems to be
came
where
back into Seattle.
through Seattle. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And what about your homecoming? Aside from this, from the airport, how were you? How was it to come back home finally after a year, be with your family and friends and
Well,
your
it
own
was
house?
it was really wonderful, but I didn't fit in. That I think was the hardest part to realize that I wasn't the same person that had left.
Yeah.
So, my concerns were really different from my cousin's concerns, and my family was really warm, they were really welcoming. A neighbor brought me over some green chili that she had, oh, I'm sorry, brought me over some green chili that she had roasted and
Hmm.
frozen from the fall, which is in New Mexico a real treat if you can get the green chili that you've taken care of yourself. And I
Right.
had it with my Thanksgiving turkey, and it was so delightful. So my family was very warm and welcoming. And then Because when I was in Nam, I said to Duffy, Duffy, it's too crazy back in the States. So I extended for a year because I said I wanted to get the feel of the land before I got out. Duffy got out right away. And I think I made a good choice because it was much harder for her than it was for me. So then I
Right.
went to an Air Force base and was there for a year. And then I moved to Colorado, to Denver.
Right. You say that it changed you. How did it change you? How are you different?
Well, I was going to tell you a story. So I
Yeah.
was in Colorado for about maybe 4 years. And when Nixon left, I had some friends and we were celebrating. And I said something about being in Vietnam. And that was the first I'd ever heard of it. So I really did keep it a deep, dark secret. So how did it change me? Over that year I was in Vietnam, I lost my God. I lost my belief in my country being a fair country that was really concerned about its troops because of the decisions they made that weren't for the troops. They were for commanding officers or politicians. And so it was really hard. It took a long time to rebuild that structure.
Right. Have you talked to other veterans of Vietnam, and did they experience similar things?
When I moved to Santa Fe, which was in 81, I went to the vet center and everybody had a different, you can call that wound maybe from
Hmm.
Vietnam. And we all dealt with them in different ways. But yeah, yeah, it was hard coming back. It was really hard.
Yeah. So you weren't unique necessarily, but other people experienced. And I guess it's good to talk to other people, right, and find out that you're not alone in this. That they felt the same way.
You know, that's the one thing that I would tell people who have had a terrible, who have had a traumatic experience is find someone who's deserved the right to hear, because you can talk to some people and it makes it worse. But there are
Right.
some people who really do understand and share it. Don't keep it. Don't isolate. And what I found is if I share with somebody and then I listen, they share with me. And it makes it even less isolating. I think it's really, really important to communicate with people
Right. Right. Those things that you lost in Vietnam, have you gotten any of them back?
in different
Repaired the
forms.
ones? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have. I live
Yeah.
in a wonderful space, in a wonderful place. And the history here is amazing, which is comforting in a way. It goes
Mhm.
back to 800 AD with Anasazi and the different people that have settled in here, the Puebloan and the Navajo and the Zuni and the Spanish and us. And yeah, it's a place that has a lot of healing power in it. And I went to the outdoors for my resourcing, I guess you could say.
Right.
I started backpacking by myself, and I did that for years until I met Larry. And then we in fact, this is a good story. So we met each other. I met him because I was hoping that he could tell me some secret places that he had up in the Pecos. That's the mountains outside of here. And I might share one of mine with him. I wasn't sure. But we ended up kind of hitting it off. But it took us 4 years to share our topographic maps. We kept them separate just in case.
Right. Right.
It was our safety net.
But I guess he's the one if you were able to eventually share.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we've
Yeah.
been together, I
Yeah.
think 35 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. What you kind of already said it, how war affects you. Is that something that you still think about all these years later,
Oh,
or is
yeah.
it something that's you've just kind of put away in the past?
Oh, no, it's always there.
It's always
I mean,
there.
and with what's going on in the world right now with Palestine and Israel, you know, it's the smells come back, the sounds, the pain that you see in people. I mean, the eyes are what I think will be with me forever. Like, when I first came, you'd walk down that ward with those young men, and they would be laughing and joking, and part of their bodies would always be really healthy, but their eyes had seen too much. And I think of those people now, and how do you ever? I believe healing can happen,
Hmm.
and it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice would you give somebody, a young person maybe, who might see this video, I don't know, 50 or 100 years down the road? What advice would you give somebody?
Hmm.
Especially somebody who's young and idealistic, maybe is thinking about a career in the military and comes to you and asks you.
That's really hard. I asked my father about going to Vietnam, and he said he thought about it, and he said, "Those young men need care, and you're a good nurse. So I guess, yeah, go." So if you feel like what you are doing will support your values that you really believe in, then consider it.
Hmm.
Talk about all the angles. What I would say to the politicians and the people who get us into war, to the politicians, is you need to go spend some time in a war zone before you decide to give that duty
Right.
to young people, but it to anybody, and see how the civilians are impacted, because I took care of them too. But I would say to the military, talk to the politicians and say, what are you going to do once this war ends? If we win, what are the plans? If we lose, how do we get out? What are the plans? How do we protect the people, the locals who really worked with us, who helped us in the war? How do we protect them when we leave? I would say ask some questions. Make sure it is what you want to do. Know it will change you, and in the healing, you'll become stronger than you could ever believe. I was talking about our statue. Um, can I show you a copy of it?
Yes, absolutely.
I got a maquette. So 30 years ago, there was a woman named Diane Evans who went to Vietnam, and came back and went to DC and noticed there weren't any statues that show that women are in war. So
Hmm.
it took her 10 years to get approval. There were some people who didn't want us to have a statue, but there were no statues that show that women are there. So, with a lot of work, a lot of fundraising, we have a statue on the mall by the wall. And this is a little maquette of it.
Hmm.
And if you look, the kneeling soldier is the one that I really related to because she's holding an empty helmet. Then the standing woman, Glenna Goodacre did the statue. She's from Santa Fe, and I got to watch her while she was working on it. And
Okay.
to Glenna, she represented hope. Maybe she's looking for a chopper. Who knows? But she's like the iron core that you had to have in you. And then, let me get it. This is the nurse tending to the wounded soldier. And that statue is so powerful to me. And I was so lucky that I got to watch while Glenna was working on it in clay. The statue itself is about 8 feet tall. It's wonderful. It's one of the most visited statues in DC because it's so healing. I think
Right.
she took all of our stories and wove them into the clay, and then that was cast in bronze. And I said it was cast in bronze, kind of like the cores in us were cast in the fiery cauldron of Vietnam.
Right.
So yeah, I'm a different person than I would have been if I hadn't gone. There's been dark times through that, and they still come back sometimes. But also, it makes me appreciate the joy and the wonderful things in life and my friends. So,
And there's no regrets that you made that decision to go to Vietnam because as a female, you didn't have to go. You know, they
no,
were drafting the men. They had no choice, but you had a choice. Yeah,
yeah,
you went anyway.
and I went anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, from this point of view, I would do it again because it's who I am.
Right. Right. So you were real quick. You talked about DC. You just came back from Washington over this Veterans Day weekend. How was that trip?
Oh, it was wonderful. You know, Diane, I heard Diane giving an interview, and they asked her the difference between 30 years ago and now. And she said 30 years ago, there were tears all over the place. And it's true. They had a
Mm,
parade for us, and it's the first time I really felt welcomed back. And it was lined with our patients,
yeah,
which was really powerful. They would say, "Thank you." It's the first time, we had heard that.
right.
And so there was a lot of crying and a lot of sharing, finding friends, but it was a sad time. 30 years later, there's been so much healing that it was joyous. What you heard was a lot of laughter, people hugging each other and talking about how glad they were to see each other and how glad to be with the statue and how happy we were for the healing that has happened over all these years.
Right.
So it was a very good trip for me because I felt welcomed back, like I really belonged, and
And
that's
that
just
that
lovely.
that's one of the saddest things about Vietnam is the and you experienced it. The troops were not welcomed back home. I think if anything, we've gotten better at that as a society
I
and
think that's true.
recognizing the sacrifice of our veterans. But it wasn't that way in Vietnam.
No, not at
That's
all,
sad. That's sad.
not at all.
Well, Dorothy, on behalf of the Americans in Wartime Experience, I want to thank you very much for sitting down and talking to us, taking some time out of your day. But more importantly, I want to thank you for your service and I want to welcome you home.
Thanks, Dennis,
You're very
and
welcome.
thank you for taking the time to do interviews and for caring about getting the history of people. I wish you could have interviewed my dad, it would have been really good.
Yeah, well, it's a very important that we do this. We've interviewed almost, well, actually, your number's 751 that we've interviewed, and it's important because if you want to know history, there's no better way to learn about history than from those who actually lived it. So, very important. But again, thank you very much for taking some time out of your day.
Thank you, Dennis.